Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought it would be fun to rank the 10 oldest palettes in my collection. I'm pretty sure I saw this idea from Samantha March, so if I can find her video, I'll link it down below in the description box. I did film today's eye look and I will also link that in the description box if you're interested in seeing it. If you've never been here before, hello, my name is Rachel. I am a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. I love to play with color, lots of colorful things. Eyeshadow is one of the ways I enjoy expressing myself. If you like what you see and you want to see more, I upload lots of videos every week. Lately, it's been 4 or 5 videos a week. So make sure you subscribe before you leave so that you don't miss new content. And let's get going with talking about these old eyeshadow palettes. So a little caveat before we get started. I decided to choose the 10 oldest palettes as far as purchase date, not necessarily the oldest as far as production. And I say that because I have the Through My Eyes palette from ColourPop, which was actually released before I ever started playing with eyeshadow at all. But I bought it much more recently. So it's an old palette in terms of shelf life, but it's not terribly old in my collection. So I'm going based off of palettes that are oldest within my collection. And I am going to start, this was a little bit tricky. First off, finding the palettes. I had to go back in my YouTube playlist and find the very earliest videos that I did and see which ones I still had because I had decluttered several of them. And then I also went back into my ColourPop order history because that was the brand that I bought a lot of at the very beginning. And I went to my oldest ColourPop orders and found which of those palettes I still had in my collection. So this is going to be a good time, but I'm going to start off with the Mimosa palette from BH Cosmetics. Now, first I discovered ColourPop, then I discovered BH Cosmetics, and I bought a lot of ColourPop, and then I bought a decent amount of BH. And the reason that Mimosa is lowest in my ranking of these 10 oldest palettes is because while it is really, really good quality, I find that the color story is a little bit redundant and it doesn't go as deep as I would like it to go. I wish, first off, that we had a really light pastel pink. Like these two right here are pretty light, but I could go even lighter with more of a white base. Something that's beautiful for blending out into nothing, you know? You can always add a color with white to get a lighter version of that color. So, you know, dip into this pan a few times, dip into this pan, and you're gonna get a lighter version of your color. So I could make a lighter pastel. In fact, it's really nice when a palette does include a bright white matte because you can do that pretty easily. But again, we're talking about the palette and what we actually have to work with and what is actually presented in the palette. So I would have preferred a slightly lighter pink toned pastel and also deeper shades. I mean, a couple of reds in here would have been a great thing to complement the color story and really, I think, pretty well stay on theme. Aside from that, I mean, it's really, really good quality. The shimmers are very pretty. I think it's a little bit redundant, so it could have either been made smaller or bring in a few more interesting shades to help round out the palette a little bit more, complement the tones that are here, and just give your user a couple more choices, you know, different things that they could play with. I do like that there are a pop of yellow, orange, a few more neutral tones if you want to stay on the neutral side of things. This one here is quite a bright pink, which is more of a lavender, lilac, purple sort of base, but still very pink. It's a great palette. The quality is amazing. None of the shimmers are duplicates, which I do like, except these two are pretty close. This one's darker, this one's lighter. Aside from that, the shimmers are nice options, and it's a good palette, but it has to be ranked somewhere, so it's number 10 out of my oldest. Next, we'll talk about the Lilac You a Lot palette from ColourPop. This is possibly one of the very first ColourPop palettes that I bought. It's actually one of the palettes I used in today's look. Again, this look is linked down below in the description box if you want to see it. I can card it above for you as well because I'm sure this video is going to go live after the look is live. But anyway, it's a great palette. I say all the time it's a very nice staple in my collection for the lighter toned purples, but it has some darker tones as well. I do like this palette because it goes from light to dark. This shade here looks sort of brown in the pan, but it's not brown at all. It is a true purpley tone. It's very pretty. The reason it's ranked low in this listing is because using it today, I found that the shimmers were not, I'm not sure, maybe not what I remembered them being or what I was expecting. Now, it has been a little while since I used it, and it has been a little while since I bought it. So I suppose there's a chance that it's just getting a bit older. Maybe things are drying out. But I think, because it's not actually that old, I haven't been doing eyeshadow for that long, I think it's more likely that I have tried new brands since trying ColourPop, and other brands offer more exciting shimmers, such as Glamlight, such as Udenzai, such as Beauty Bay. Those brands just have more interesting, impactful, and dynamic shimmers And ColourPop shimmers, there's nothing wrong with them, but especially in these lighter tones, when I went to use these shadows on today's look, I was like, oh, wasn't quite as interesting as I wanted it to be. And so that is why this palette's actually ranked at number 9 in today's list, just because it doesn't hold the drama that I want it to hold. In the number 7 spot, I'm going to place Limoncello from ColourPop. I adore this packaging. I did an entire video talking about packaging that I loved. I can card that above for you if you're interested in seeing it. Limoncello was, I think, number 1 or 2. I love this packaging. It is so, so beautiful. Even the inside, you know, that the theme carries through. You've got little lemons here. It's textured, it's thick, it's sturdy, it's chic. I would just put this on display. It's so pretty. And it's interesting to me that packaging makes such a big difference in the user experience, but I love this packaging. I lived in Italy for a little while, not long enough. I always say that because it really wasn't long enough, but this brings back very happy memories from a time in my younger years. And I just love the packaging. However, the color story is less exciting to me than the packaging. I actually admit in that video that I bought this palette largely for the packaging, and that's when I was being a little bit more irresponsible with my purchases. So I'm not exactly proud of that, but it is what it is. The color story is good. If you like neutrals, this is a great palette. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite neutral palette, and I keep it in my collection because I do like this palette and I reach for it when I want some more neutral tones. But I like that it has a few pops of color. I like that it's all on theme: yellow with limoncello, green leaves, blue because blue goes amazing with yellow, blue sky, it all works. And then the shimmers are interesting. It's lower simply because I don't use neutrals that much. I mean, it is one of the oldest palettes in my collection. I think it's beautiful. It performs very nicely, but I don't really use it that much. So it has to rank a little bit lower. Back to BH Cosmetics for a bit. We're going to go into the Passion in Paris palette. This is a great palette. This is something that many people voted as, you know, their best palette from 2020, I think is when it was released. 2021, I forget. It's part of BH Cosmetics Travel Series, and obviously it was released before they had their bankruptcy issues, but it's a really good palette. This is BH, very, very good quality formula, and the color story is deep and moody. It's got a few neutrals to balance things out. It's got a couple little pops of color to make things a bit more interesting. Overall, it's just a darker palette, which is why I rank it lower, because I have found, now remember, this entire video is preference-based. This is just my opinion based on where I am in my eyeshadow journey. It might change. If I ranked these a year from now, maybe they'd be in different places. But where I am now, I would say I don't tend to use a lot of these much, much darker tones, except to deepen an outer corner. It's just because it's a darker toned palette. It's beautiful. It's great quality. This one up here, City of Light, is sort of a silver shimmer, but it's very dark. It's like a black-based silver shimmer. And I find that I tend to use medium to light shimmers. So again, with the dark shimmers, they don't get a lot of use. I love this shade here called Louvre. This is such an amazing inner corner highlight. I will often dip into this palette just for the inner corner highlight that this shade can offer me. Sacré-Cœur is a lovely, lovely purple sort of wash of color. It's so beautiful. Seine right here, again, a lovely blue. It's got a hint of purple in it, but it's not so much that it would be a periwinkle. This shade here, Arc de Triomphe, it's a beautiful purple. It's just, I don't reach into this palette because it's more dark leaning, but it is really good quality. And honestly, the reds in this palette, although I have used them a decent amount, I find that I have more interesting reds elsewhere in my collection. So again, great palette. It's just, this is a ranking video, right? So it has to land somewhere. Next, we can talk about, oh, this one hurt a little bit. This is the Lush Life palette from ColourPop. I'm actually considering decluttering this, and I feel a little bit like I'm betraying the palette by saying that, and I know that's ridiculous, but this was one of my favorite ColourPop palettes for ages. In fact, a long time ago, I did a ColourPop ranking video where I landed on my top 3 palettes, and I did a look with just those 3, and this was one of them. I thought that this was a great palette. Upon release, it was so interesting. It was so unique. I hadn't seen a color story like this before. I love the packaging. It's creative. It's colorful. And one of my favorite things is that the colors you see on the package are the colors that you get on the inside. So you know exactly what your options are when you're looking at your palettes all lined up. I really appreciate that. I know it's hard to do with bigger palettes or more varied color stories. I get that, but I do appreciate it. I really love this size of palette, and 12 to 16 pan is very workable, in my opinion. That's kind of my preferred palette size. The bigger ones, I get overwhelmed. The smaller ones, I'm like, I've only got a few options. They get lost, they get dropped behind things. The reason that this one is ranking where it is because at this point, I think I have some more interesting shades, color stories that I prefer to work within, although I do love the blue and green always. And this one is a tiny bit harder to work with than a slightly more cohesive color story, which you're going to see next. I mean, it is very tropical, right? And it's got some strange color combinations. Now, mind you, you can get some very cool looks with these colors. People are so creative with these colors, and they really do come up with wild, I don't know, toucan, peacocky sorts of eyeshadow looks, and it's very pretty. But I don't know, I don't reach for a ton anymore. I did a video where I compared this palette to the Peridot palette from BH Cosmetics Birthstone series, and I did one look, a matching look, one side with Lush Life, one side with Peridot, and I was really trying to decide if I needed to keep both. I haven't decided that yet, but I'm kind of considering decluttering this one since I don't usually dip into it, but then I look at it and go, oh, I should play with it again. So I haven't decided yet. I'm still on the fence. It's a great palette though. This is the one that hurt the most, I think. This is the At Forest Sight palette between Raw Beauty Kristi and ColourPop. Ranking this so far down, I mean, this is number 5, right? Yes, 5. Ranking this further down was a little bit painful for me because this also topped 2 to 3 ColourPop. I worked forever to get this palette. I searched and searched until I finally found a seller who had it and who was willing to sell it for a reasonable price. And then I stayed up late to negotiate with that seller until we reached a price point that I was also okay with. And then I went to bed feeling exhilarated and thrilled that I finally got this palette that I had loved since I first saw it, since I first started doing eyeshadow. The At Forest Sight palette is just beautiful. I love the color story. I love the artwork. I do watercolor painting myself, so the artwork has just a special place in my heart because it's these natural tones and it just sort of fades off into nothing. I love that about watercolor. The artwork plays through onto the back. It plays through onto the inside. I think it's cleverly named. It's just perfect. Everything is perfect about this palette and the colors that Kristi chose for it. I ranked this palette slightly higher than the Lush Life palette because this one, unlike Lush Life, is a more cohesive color story. You could choose any of these shadows, put them together, and they're going to work. Any of the mattes with either of the shimmers, it's just going to create a look that makes sense. And that's something that the Lush Life palette struggles with a bit because the color story is a little bit more disjointed, a little more broken up, still pretty and interesting and fun, but disjointed. This one is not disjointed. This is cohesion to a T. I like that it's matte heavy as opposed to shimmer heavy because I prefer to build a look with the mattes and get all the gradient and the depth and the shadowing and then pop on a shimmer for an accent. So we've got cool silvery toned shimmer and a warm gold toned shimmer, but this one's not even that cool. It definitely has a brown base. But again, you could do a palette bingo, choose any of these colors and you're going to get a pretty look. They all work together so well. When Kristi made this palette, she went online, found pictures of the Pacific Northwest, which was her theme, and she used a color picking tool and grabbed colors out of nature. And those are the colors that she put into her palette. And I think it's obvious. It's all so lovely together. So this palette is just beautiful. I need to use this one again too. It's so much fun. Moving on, we're at number 4, and at number 4 I ranked the Blue Moon palette from ColourPop. This is, again, one of my earliest ColourPop purchases. I went back and forth as to whether I should choose this palette, which is much darker toned, or their On Cloud Blue palette, which is more pastel light toned blues. And I opted for this one because of the depth, and that is why I keep it because it's really excellent blue shadows. You can't always find a really good blue, but this palette offers some really good blues. I like that it goes light to dark again, and it's got some pretty shimmers. I often use this one as an inner corner highlight or even a face highlight. This Lumi shade right here is a white iridescent blue. The reason that this one's ranked a little bit lower than the one that comes next is because I find that I don't really use pretty much these two shimmers. I do use this one sometimes called Billie Jean. It's not a very exciting shimmer, and usually if I'm doing a blue look, I don't want to bring in a blue shimmer. I want to bring in maybe a purple shimmer or a pink shimmer or a green shimmer, something a little bit different that still works with blue. So this shimmer is a pretty good tone for my personal eyeshadow preferences, but it just doesn't get that much use. And then this shimmer here is called Mad About You. It's a great navy kind of shimmer, but I don't use that hardly ever. And if I really wanted to grab a navy shimmer, I would probably pull it out of the Hummingbird palette from Uden's Eye, and that one is darker, but it has little flecks of purple, so it makes it more interesting. So this is, again, just like Lilac, it's been a staple in my collection for so long. I've heard that this blue palette surpasses in quality so many other blue palettes, including the BH Cosmetics Sweet Shop palette. What's that one called? Bubblegum. I've heard that this one's even better than that, and those are amazing palettes. So I mean, I like blue eyeshadow, and I like that this palette gives me a nice variety. It's easy to pair with other palettes. It's just a great palette overall. The one that comes next is the Mint to Be palette from ColourPop, also within their monochromatic series. I have to hold this one carefully because this shade finally broke on me. I literally vacuumed it off my carpet like 10 minutes ago. This is the Mint to Be palette. I think that this palette is actually a lot of fun. I end up using it more than I thought as an accent palette or with, with something else. It's, oh dear, all of these shadows are falling out. Oh my goodness. They're just like dropping out of the pan completely. I'm gonna change the way I'm holding this. This palette offers a very good variety of minty tones. It's not just, your mint shimmer. You've got several mattes in here. Why are these all literally all of them are falling out. Like the entire pat of shadow leaves the pan behind and just drops out. When I was vacuuming up this shade, one of them fell out, and I thought that the pan had fallen out because it fell out in a perfectly pressed pattern, this little pat. And then I was like, oh wait, no, there's no pan attached to that shadow. It's just shadow that was still pressed together. So I had to carefully pick up this clump of finely pressed shadow and put it back into the pan, which was waiting empty in the palette. So everything's falling out. Oh no. This is a really great palette. The quality is very, very nice. I think that there's a good variety of tones. You might think that these three are all kind of the same, or at least these two, but this one is like a pastel matte mint shade. And then this one over here has a lot more grainy brown in it, so it's still minty, but it's more of a neutral leaning kind of mint, if you can get a neutral leaning mint. You can, apparently. There you go. The shimmers are beautiful. Really great inner corner highlights, nice face highlights, particularly this one if you want to just bring a bit of mint to your look. The reason that this one is ranked higher than Blue Moon was because although it doesn't have the depth that Blue Moon has, I use all of these shades, whereas in Blue Moon there are like two shadows that don't really get that much use. Although this one right here, now I guess I can't use that one. I mean, I can swipe around to the dregs of the pan, but it's a little sad. All right, we're in the top two. This ranking was harder than I expected it to be. It really was, especially because the older palettes sometimes have memories tied to them, and you're like, oh, but I can't rank that one lower. All right, number 2 is the Sprinkle a Little Magic palette. Again, a ColourPop palette. I bought a lot of ColourPop in the beginning. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that I ranked this one quite as high as I did. I thought that one of the monochromatics might come before it, but that's actually why I ranked it higher. But let's first talk about the packaging. The palette is absolutely beautiful. Like, when ColourPop does a collaboration, they usually do an awesome job. The packaging's lovely, it's thick, it's sturdy. It's one of the palettes, one of the newer ones when they launched the bigger pan sizes. It has beautiful embossing and detail work and little bits of glitter, but not so bad that it comes off all over the place. It's just really beautiful packaging. And then here's the inside, lovely pink and green. It's very springy. I only have one qualm with this palette, and that is that these two shades are far too similar. They're just way too close. Like, why? Come on, why? But aside from that, the colors are very pretty and interesting. This is a little bit more of a minty green, but it's got some spring green in there. This is a spring green. This is more of a yellowy green. These two are nice, a nice deepening shade for any of the other mattes that you use. I have no problems with the palette aside from the two pink mattes being way too close. But I think it's really pretty. The quality is really good. It performs nicely. This one up here is breaking on me a little bit as well. I don't know. I find that every palette I own that has a Super Shocks shadow in it, the shadow ends up breaking on me. Do you guys have that problem too? I'm not rough with my palettes. If they fall to the floor, it's because they've been accidentally knocked over. I don't throw them around. I don't drop them intentionally. I don't shove them into the cupboard. Like, I'm very careful with my palettes. I stack them this way or this way. I don't know. The Super Shocks always break on me. But the palette's really pretty. I do like this green because it's a nice complement to deepen out this one, and it can work to deepen out the pink, so it works nicely for that. I don't really use this shade that often, although it is a pretty shade. It's kind of a teal shimmer, but it's a little bit more heavy on the blue silvery side. It's a lovely palette, and the reason this one ranked higher than the other two monochromatics from ColourPop is because it does offer more of a color story. It's not a monochromatic palette. Now, for what they are, the monochromatics are great because they offer a variety within that color story. But if I just want to try to do one look with a palette, I usually would reach for something that gives me some more variety within, 2 or 3 colors as opposed to just one, and that's the only reason this is ranking higher. And finally, in the number 1 spot, first I used ColourPop. Then I branched into BH Cosmetics and I was like, oh, I don't need to try anything else. These are both so great. And then I tried Beauty Bay. And I have had a couple of Beauty Bay palettes at this point, but there's only one that I've held on to, and that's the Wilderness palette. This palette, I think I snagged it on a restock. Well, I know that I snagged it on a restock because it was really hyped and everyone's like, it's coming back, it's coming back. And so I grabbed it when I could, and I'm very glad I did. I am so glad. This is not a regretted purchase at all. The Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay is excellent. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate that it's cool toned and warm toned, light toned and deep toned. We've got more ocean tones, sky, blues and greens and aquas. But then we go more earthy, grounded, natural tones with the oranges and the yellows and the greens and the reds. You could do sunset, you could do ocean. Guys, this palette has so much variety. I think the color story is interesting, but also very creative. I think that whoever designed this palette, overall, Beauty Bay's color stories are, they're pretty good anyway. I think they're one of the brands that offers more unique color stories to their consumer. This one's great. And I like that the shimmers, none of the shimmers are super dark because, again, I don't really tend to grab very dark shimmers. All of these shimmers are more mid-toned or lighter. Like even these two right here that are darker are definitely mid-toned shimmers. This is a beautiful foresty green. Now I'm looking at it and I want to play with it. Maybe I should do a look with that one. And then this is a beautiful blue, but it's got a lot of silver in it. We do have a couple of deepening shades and it's just fabulous. It's just great. My only complaint with this palette is this top shade here called Snow. It's kind of like a bone white. I don't use it for anything. A crisp, bright, snowy white that actually should be named Snow, that would be a great idea. But this one was just a bit like, ugh, why? This shade here, Ray, also great face highlighter, but it's sort of it's kind of an ivory cream shimmer with flecks of green, but not a lime green. I don't know, more of a bronzy sort of green. It's a really interesting shade. I think the palette's amazing. This is my favorite Beauty Bay palette that I've tried ever. Although I tend to prefer smaller palettes, even though this one's bigger, it's still one of my favorites. I just think it has so much to offer that you open it up and you get all these ideas. And because it has so much to offer in good quality and exciting shimmers, and it's just interesting, you can easily pair it with other palettes and get even more looks. So it's a lot of fun to play with. And I don't know, I just really appreciate this one. This is definitely number 1 out of my 10 oldest palettes. So there you go, guys. That is my video on ranking my 10 oldest palettes. Many thanks to Samantha March for the idea. I don't know if she got it from someone else, but again, if I find her video, it's going to be down in the description box. Thank you very much for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment below if you have any video ideas. Remember to like and subscribe before you leave if you want to see more. And until I see you guys in my next video, which is going to be soon, I hope you have a great day. Bye.